Tonight, from councillors to citizens, we're tracking reaction to Toronto's new financial deal with the province.
It's actually a good move by the government.
I begrudgingly sort of embrace it.
The Ford government agrees to pick up the tab for Toronto's highways, what the mayor is giving up in exchange, and why not all councillors are on board.
I heard commotion in the hallway, looked out, it was like so much smoke in the hallway.
Plus, a deadly blaze at a shelter hotel, why the chief says the building will now get a full assessment.
It doesn't really feel like an end because there's been like no defining moment.
And logistical legal nightmare. CBC Toronto investigates after a woman's sex assault case is tossed because of a double booking at a courthouse. We are live tonight at City Hall, the focal point of an historic day in Toronto. The mayor and the premier agreeing to a new financial deal for the city that'll see billions of dollars for Toronto for everything from housing to transit to policing. Good evening, I'm Chris Glover. Toronto's new deal with the province is being called a game changer by both sides. In a moment, we'll take you back live to City Hall. We've been hitting the streets tonight, finding out how people and councillors are reacting to the massive new financial agreement. But first, let's get you all the details of the new deal. Our senior reporter at Queen's Park, Mike Crawley, has our top story tonight.
As the legislature's bells signal a vote, a handshake and a sort of hug signal a new deal between Premier and Mayor. The deal will see Ontario taxpayers fork over billions for Toronto for costs the city believes the province should have covered all along.
This is a massive, massive deal to take the burden off the people and the taxpayers of Toronto.
It unlocks the city potential. It provides billions in capital and operating dollars so we can do more for people.
The biggest ticket item? Uploading the Gardiner Expressway. The province takes over the costs of rebuilding and maintaining it.
Massive piece of infrastructure that gets utilized by not just people in Toronto.
Same goes for the Don Valley Parkway. The Ford government is also promising to fund 55 new subway trains to replace the aging cars on the Bloor-Danforth line. In total, the province takes over as much as $7.6 billion of the city's capital costs.
By uploading the Gardiner and the DVP, the city will be able to spend billions more on affordable housing, fixing transit, and building communities with all the things we love in the neighborhoods.
The Ford government also provides Toronto $1.2 billion in extra operating funds over the next 3 years. That includes money for the TTC, some help with the city's shelter programs, and funding to operate the Eglinton Crosstown and Finch West LRTs whenever they start running. Some of the province's commitments hinge on Ottawa pitching in as well.
We need all levels of government working together to ensure this world-class city, Canada's largest city, remains financially sustainable.
In exchange for all this, the Premier gets to forge ahead with his plans for redeveloping Ontario Place without a fight from the Mayor. She insists it's worth it.
This deal is historic, is huge. It means a big deal, new deal.
A deal that comes just in time for the city's budget season. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
While Mayor Chow says she will no longer stand in the way of Ford's plans for Ontario Place, groups opposing his redevelopment plans say this deal does nothing to stop their advocacy or their legal action. But tonight we're also learning they might not have to push so hard, at least on one major sticking point. For that part of our coverage, let's turn now to Dale Manukduk.
Ontario Place, out of this whole deal, is about that big. And the whole deal is about that big.
While the redevelopment of Ontario Place is a small thing for Premier Ford, it's a big deal to people fighting to keep the entire park public and oppose its transformation into a private mega spa.
We can use all the people fighting for this issue as possible, and we really hope that the city will step back into this fight and maybe consider joining us in our legal action against the province.
Ontario Place for All is taking the government to court over not doing a full environmental assessment.
They skipped an environmental assessment on the most contentious part of the work, which is destroying everything at West Island. Every single tree, every piece of vegetation, every part of the microclimate.
The message was clear.
That fight will have to go on without the backing of Mayor Olivia Chow for now. She promised as part of her campaign to become mayor to keep Ontario Place public. But now she says it's out of her hands.
The land belongs to the provincial government, and we do not have the authority to stop the development.
If they endorse and support.
Even with a broken promise, this political scientist says it's still a big win for the mayor.
Olivia Chow has played a very pragmatic hand here of saying, look, the city of Toronto desperately needs additional financial resources to meet a whole variety of critical municipal service needs, and she's putting that first.
Meanwhile, the design for the spa has undergone changes, shrinking from the original massive footprint. In a statement, Therma, the Austrian company building the spa, says the city's public consultation process resulted in changes to our design to feature even more free waterfront space, trails, and parkland. Therma Canada will continue to work with all levels of government to deliver a year-round, affordable, family-friendly destination. The province did say it would consider moving the underground parking lot to the C&E grounds, which would save taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. But advocates want the entire project scrapped, with or without the city's help.
The fight has always been at Queen's Park. The buck will stop with Ford, and there's still an opportunity to win. Similar with the Greenbelt, the mass mobilization of people will force Doug Ford to change positions.
While this might not be the best look for Mayor Olivia Chow, the people I spoke with today are excited for the city to be in a better position to deliver on housing and transit infrastructure. They also say that she played a role in getting the Ford government to consider moving the parking lot, and that's a big win. Next for them, they want people to call their local MPPs in hopes of stopping the government and Therma from moving forward. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
Next to Annam Khan, she's standing by live outside City Hall tonight. And Annam, you've been gathering reaction from citizens and from councillors. Let's start with how people are reacting to this history-making deal for Toronto.
Chris, people in the city know how desperately Toronto needs money, especially when it comes to the $1.5 billion budget shortfall just for the next year. So in that sense, many people I spoke to are happy with this decision. They're hoping the money comes in to improve services like transit and making their life more affordable in the city. But on the other hand, when it comes to Ontario Place, many people are not so keen to see the mayor back down from the fight. And here's what people have to say.
It's actually a good move by the government. Nowadays, if I'm going to get to work, I will book an Uber because I get late. I would have used the streetcar if there's more frequency of the car, right?
And it's a bit unfortunate that she had to make a compromise with Ontario Place and having to open that up, but this city is essentially bankrupt and needs money so badly. As a person who lives here, I begrudgingly sort of embrace it.
Okay, interesting. So let's shift now to councillors, and some, including one of Chow's closest allies at City Hall, are not happy. What are we hearing from councillors tonight?
Many of the people we spoke to are celebrating the move to upload the highways onto the province. Gord Perks, who's the councillor for Parkdale High Park, said the move is fantastic. But on the other hand, Olivia Chow's own deputy mayor, Asma Malik, is not so happy with this decision. She's speaking out tonight against the decision to stop fighting the redevelopment plans of Ontario Place. And now Malik has been fiercely critical of this project because it falls within her ward. And tonight she released a statement. She's the councillor for Spadina Fort York. She said they are unilaterally pushing through legislation to take the site with no regard for the public or for good planning. The province and Therma can make a different choice. Now, despite that opposition, it's interesting to note that John Tory, former Mayor John Tory, he tried to get the province to pay for the highways, but was never able to make that happen. And tonight he's congratulating the city and the province, saying it's a good move to put the public interest first.
Yeah, you're right. Very interesting hearing from the former mayor tonight. Annam, thank you so much for all that reaction. Appreciate it. From city finances to your personal pocketbook, you may have noticed people spending a bit more time online today trying to scoop up some Cyber Monday deals. More than a third of Canadians were expected to shop online today, according to the Retail Council of Canada's latest survey. That's almost twice as many as last year. Surprising, maybe, given the rising cost of living. One expert we spoke to tonight says even though lots of shoppers will no doubt take part in Cyber Monday, they might not spend as much this year.
I think people are very mindful about their spending these days. So the reports are suggesting sales will probably go down. But at the same time, if they do go up, it might be really a function of inflation because we've seen 5 to 10% increases on the price of goods.
Meanwhile, south of the border, the numbers are in and the sales are up. Black Friday shoppers there spent a record $9.8 billion US, and that's an increase of about 8% from last year. All right, giving you a live look at the city tonight. It is -3 and still a good chance of seeing some flurries overnight. Colette Kennedy is here now with a first look at the forecast. Hey, Colette, I might admit I was a bit caught off guard today with that blustery wind.
Yeah, it's going to take some getting used to. We're at that point in the season now, Chris. It's not like these are the first snow squall watches or warnings that we've seen. We've had some already, but this is really the first, big event that we're looking at, and a little more widespread here with those strong winds coming across the lake. So North GTA, there are some areas here where you're in the snow squall watch, but the areas in pink, those are the warning areas where we may see 15 to 25, even 35 centimeters of snow as things really ramp up tonight, overnight, and into tomorrow. And then further north from there, there are some winter weather travel advisories. So it's just really good to remember that they come in these streamers. So you can be in clear skies, fine driving, and then all of a sudden whiteout conditions. So we'll see those with that westerly to northwesterly flow. At times, some flurries will make their way into the GTA and even into southwestern Ontario. You've been seeing some of those streamers coming all the way over from Lake Michigan. Tonight, -5, feeling like -12, and then -1, the best we're going to do tomorrow afternoon. I'll let you know when things are going to warm up when I come back, Chris.
All right, looking forward to those details. We'll talk to you again in just a few minutes, Colette. Some developing news tonight out of North York. A shooting sent one person to hospital with serious, potentially life-threatening injuries. Police were called for multiple reports of shots fired near Jane Street and Grand Ravine Drive, north of Shepherd, just before 9 tonight. One man was found at the scene and rushed to hospital, and police say they are searching for multiple suspects. Taking you north of the city now to Huntsville, and we're learning more about the 5 people killed over the weekend in a 2-car crash. The Chinese Consulate General in Toronto is confirming today that 4 Chinese students were killed, and they were all teenagers living in the GTA. The crash happening on Highway 60 near Hidden Valley Road on Saturday. Police say the teenagers were heading westbound in a Mercedes SUV, while a 42-year-old woman was heading eastbound in a Ford SUV. Today, the woman was identified as an employee of Muskoka Algonquin Healthcare, and the teens were between the ages of 15 and 17 and lived in North York and Richmond Hill. Now to a tragedy back here in Toronto. A man is dead after a fire at a shelter hotel near Jane and Wilson. The fire marshal is investigating the cause, and Toronto's fire chief says the building is now going to have a full assessment. Greg Ross has the latest from officials and people who knew the victim.
Fire crews were called to the Toronto Plaza Hotel at 9:45 this morning.
Upon arrival, there were smoke and flames visible.
Fire Chief Matthew Pegg says the fire started in a room on the 4th floor. The occupant of that room was inside at the time.
That occupant was very quickly removed, brought downstairs, and transferred to the care of awaiting Toronto paramedics. Unfortunately, we have received confirmation that occupant has been pronounced dead.
The identity of the victim has not been released. Since 2016, the city has been using this hotel as a shelter. Toronto Fire Services conducted a building inspection here in July of this year, and they say at that time it was in compliance with fire code.
As is always the case in fatal fire and critical fire investigations, there will again be a full assessment as to the status of the building.
Part of that assessment will be to determine if smoke detectors in the building were working. This man, who lives next door to the unit where the fire started, says he realized something was wrong when he smelled smoke.
And then I heard commotion in the hallway, looked out, it was like so much smoke in the hallway.
He says he didn't know his neighbor who died in the fire very well.
Didn't really see him a lot, but anytime I see him, he always like say hi, how are you, you know? Yeah, nice guy.
The fire comes just 2 days after another person was found dead on the property of the Toronto Plaza Hotel. Police have confirmed a sudden death here on Saturday. Residents tell us the body of a woman was discovered in one of these buses in the parking lot.
People like sneaking on the buses because they're waiting to get into the shelter and there's nowhere for them to sleep at night.
Police say they are not treating that death as a criminal incident. Greg Rowe.
Returning now with a CBC Toronto exclusive. A U of T student is speaking out tonight against Ontario's justice system. She says her sex assault case was tossed. Part of the reason her case didn't go ahead is because the courtroom was double booked. Angelina King walks us through the case and uncovers it's part of a troubling pattern.
On the day of the trial this spring, the woman went to court. She told me how difficult it was to face the accused and relive everything as she prepared to testify. We're going to call her Taylor. That isn't her real name. We aren't identifying her because she was the complainant in a sexual offense case. We also aren't naming the accused because he wasn't convicted. Now, at the end of 2021, he was charged with sexually assaulting Taylor. But the day she went to court in Fort Frances, she didn't end up testifying because the case didn't go ahead. That's because 2 sexual assault trials were booked on the same day in the same courtroom in Fort Frances. The other case was prioritized, and so Taylor's was rescheduled for 7 months later. But before it could be heard, it got tossed because it took too long to get to trial. Here's Taylor.
It feels like when somebody like passes away and you're like in disbelief, and it doesn't really feel like an end because there's been like no defining moment, and I'll never get that, and he'll probably never get in trouble for what he did.
So last year in Ontario, we set a record high for the most criminal cases thrown out due to delays, 125, which was actually double compared to the year before. We also saw the most applications to toss a case at 420. Now, when I say applications, I'm referring to what's become known as a Jordan application. That's the framework put in place by the Supreme Court that says trials be completed by a certain deadline, 18 or 30 months, depending on which level of court it's being heard at. Now, if the case drags longer than that, an accused can file a Jordan application. If it's granted by a judge, then the charge or charges are stayed. Now, since Jordan was implemented in July of 2016 until the end of 2022, 86 sexual assault cases have been thrown out. I spoke with a defense lawyer who said that the record-breaking numbers last year are due to the system dealing with the aftermath of pandemic closures. I also spoke with a lawyer who specializes in civil sexual assault cases. She says she doesn't think Jordan should apply to sexual assault charges because those types of cases are often more complex and require more time.
When do the rights of the accused trump the rights of the victim of the alleged crime and the rights of society as a whole to have a trial that will show whether or not that person was guilty? And if that person was guilty, having that guilty person walk free.
The Ministry of the Attorney General says it's working on addressing delays and backlogs to ensure cases get through the system more efficiently. Angelina King, CBC News, Toronto.
Updating you now on an active police investigation in Toronto. Officers are searching for a man wanted for stealing a bag from a parked car that contained more than $300,000 in jewelry. It happened around 4:20 p.m. on October 19th near Albion Road and Highway 27 in Rexdale. The suspect smashed the passenger side window of the parked vehicle and then stole the bag containing the jewelry. The man is described as 25 to 35 years old with a medium build. The city is warning drivers to expect more delays in the downtown core. Starting today, southbound University Avenue between College and Queen will be reduced to one lane for infrastructure upgrades. Some of the work includes new safety measures along bike lanes, road resurfacing, and the replacement of a deteriorating water main. That work is expected to be completed by summer 2024. The northbound lanes of University Avenue will also have 2 lanes closed for the Ontario Line construction. It'll be reduced to 1 lane after December until its expected completion in 2026. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, Colette, last word of the night to you, and kind of a mixed bag of winter depending on where you are in our region tonight.
Yeah, Chris, I guess that kind of sums it up. There are areas that it's really cold, plus getting a lot of snow in those snow squall watches and warnings that I was talking about earlier in the show. But there are areas where it's cold and we're just getting flurries, like into the GTA and back into parts of southwestern Ontario. Even there, some of you get it off of Lake Huron, but really around Lake Huron, Georgian Bay, and the Lee of the Lakes with this cold air plunging in tonight and into tomorrow. Daytime highs, in most cases, not even getting above freezing. However, by Wednesday, we see this pattern moderate a little bit. And then I did say I'd let you know when it's going to warm up. All right, well, let's go to Thursday. That's when temperatures will be back to normal or even a few degrees above as we get towards the end of the week. Right now, we're dealing with that colder core and these strong winds. And it's those winds with that long enough fetch across the lake, relatively warmer waters with that colder air pushing across that picks up and gets us into the snow squall situation. As those winds change direction through the day tomorrow and they go from west to a little more northwesterly component, then the areas seeing the squalls will shift as well. So you really just have to allow extra time and be very cautious because of the changing driving conditions. And it can be so highly localized where there are areas with those whiteout conditions. Now it is that shift of the winds changing a little bit more southwest by Wednesday, and that's why the temperatures come up a little, but they're still below seasonal on that day. So look through the models and you can see those lines coming right in, and then you get in areas where there's nothing there. So the 400 will be tricky, likely at times tomorrow if you're going from Barrie to Toronto, up towards Barrie, be aware of that. Then a little bit lighter, more widespread light flurry activity into Wednesday. So yes, flurry still in the forecast Wednesday. Overnight temperatures, -5 likely for Toronto. This model wants to push us to -6, certainly -7 for Windsor. And then a very cool daytime high tomorrow, another cold night tomorrow night, and Wednesday, a little better. It's really Thursday's your day if you're looking for it to get a bit warmer, Chris.
Yeah, Thursday is looking nice. All right, thank you, Colette. And that's it for us tonight. I'll be back with you tomorrow night at 11, and we'll see you then.